All right, what's up, everybody? This is G here, and today we are going to be talking from Solo Fighter. Let's go. We're going to be discussing UFC Apex 4 in Las Vegas, Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Coming up tomorrow, guys. I mean, in all honesty, this is probably a fight that a lot of people are excited for, considering that they're going to see, Dustin Poirier basically get back in the cage and basically do his thing, which is mostly boxing. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but I think people just have to kind of figure out they're going to get what they get. Dustin Poirier has been able to take down and fight with a lot of people on the ground, but we all saw his performance against Khabib Nurmagomedov, and can we really be angry at him? I mean, who else is able to do really anything with Khabib Nurmagomedov on the ground? So we can't really be mad at him. But Dustin Poirier has great, amazing boxing, and we're going to basically see him apply, that trade that he has, and pretty much we're probably all going to enjoy it. But going against Dan Hooker and everything, I mean, we've seen this kickboxing. We've seen this striking. We've seen his power. We've seen everything that he could basically go out there and do. And I have to say that it's also amazing as well. I mean, he's pretty much on, what, 3-fight win streak here? Yeah, 3-fight win streak. And, I mean, he's taken down Vic. He's taken down Iaquinta. He's taken down Felder. And, I mean, at least one of those names in there and everything is definitely a high-ranking guy. And Paul Felder himself was also getting up there in the rankings. Like, he was pretty much making his shot and making his case to actually having, a title contention fight, if not more. And so we get to see Poirier versus Hooker, and they're basically going to battle it out. I don't really feel like there's going to be a lot of, I'm going to say the word grappling. I'm going to say there's not going to be a lot of grappling. I don't think there's going to be a lot of submissions thrown out there. I don't think these guys are going to go out there and try to throw, the first takedown. Kind of a gentleman's thing, to go out there and basically just see who's going to knock who out first. Those are the type of people that I believe that Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker, that they are. And they definitely have to put on a show, especially if they want to say, hey, I'm the next guy that gets to fight Khabib. I mean, if you think about it, Khabib is already going to fight Justin Gaethje. I mean, there's Tony Ferguson hanging around the corner. I mean, and there's other fighters that definitely are trying to make their case for getting to fight, Khabib after that. But these two, if they go out there and put on a show like everybody knows that they can, it's definitely a thing that they could possibly get that next shot. I mean, of course, everybody wants to see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Tony Ferguson is still sitting in that number 2 spot. So if the UFC thinks that they can make money off of it, I'm going to have to go out there and say that I'm pretty sure that the UFC will go out there and say, hey, Tony Ferguson is now back in the mix, and the winner between Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker, one of you guys are going to have to fight him. But, hey, what's up, Fight Book? What's going on, man? Nice to have you here. But, yeah, in between those two, one of them was probably going to have to fight, Tony Ferguson if the UFC could find a way to sneak Tony Ferguson in there. And in the very case that Conor McGregor just magically somehow, miraculously decides to come out of retirement again for the 3rd or 4th or 5th or 100th time that he decides that he wants to fight, that he has to fire in him, then you have, so many people wanting to vie for the title against Khabib Nurmagomedov. So that's definitely a thing that's going on there. And we just have to take a look at hey, does Dan Hooker really deserve to be in there versus Khabib? And a lot of people are going to have to say yes. Dan Hooker is no slouch, okay? Dan Hooker, in his 10 wins, has 8 finishes and only 2 decisions. I mean, yes, he's lost to Barboza, and yes, he's lost to Rodriguez, but look at what those guys can basically do, on the feet. Barboza is no slouch. Rodriguez, we've seen what he could do. He could just pull things out of the thin air and basically just knock people out. And so that's not taking away anything from Dan Hooker, not even a little bit. But in the same case, you have to look at Hooker, taking on someone like Dustin Poirier and see what the body of work that Dustin Poirier has had over the last 6 years. I mean, yes, Dustin Poirier lost to Khabib, but when you think about it, who really hasn't? You know, but yes, Dustin Poirier has also lost to Conor McGregor. But when you look at who Conor McGregor has beaten and who Conor McGregor has lost to, I mean, you gotta kind of, you know, take it with a grain of salt and everything. How that little triangle there works out between Conor McGregor, Khabib, and Nate Diaz, and throw Dustin Poirier in there. You know, so you gotta kind of think about that. But think about this: Dustin Poirier. Yes, Fight Book. Thank you. Yes, it's going to be a while before we see Tony Ferguson after that war. I mean, to take a sidebar, Tony Ferguson, he pretty much took a beating. I don't know if they came out with anything stating the extent of his injuries, but I'm pretty sure Tony Ferguson is going to always say that he's not hurt, that nothing's wrong with him, that he's all right. But who knows? He probably has a ton of broken bones that he's going to heal from over the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and tell everybody that he's fine. And when the UFC gives him another fight, he'll probably hop in there and just say everything's all right. But if we want Tony versus Khabib anytime within at least the next 2-3 years, I mean, we have to be totally honest here and say, hey, Tony Ferguson, heal up and come back stronger. You know, like actually fix the flaws and fix, you know, the things that basically gave him that loss, you know, so he could come back and actually beat someone like Justin Gaethje. Like, Justin Gaethje's, the guy is like seriously legit. The guy is just crazy in everything that he could possibly do. Even in a loss, Justin Gaethje just looks like he is an unstoppable tank that people just have to flash knock out, or they just have to have Francis Ngannou power or something like that. So, I mean, Tony Ferguson, he could do it, but yeah, Fight Book is right. He's not going to come back for a while. Even though we would want him to come back very, very soon. But we'll have to see about that. But, I mean, hey, Justin Gaethje did actually lose to Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier, like I was saying, I mean, he beat Eddie Alvarez. I'm going to have to say he beat Eddie Alvarez twice. I mean, the same way that he was fighting Eddie Alvarez in the first fight is the same way that he fought him in the second fight. And that turned into a TKO. I mean, Anthony Pettis, as tough as Anthony Pettis is and everything, he submitted Anthony Pettis. And think about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu credentials that Anthony Pettis has in between, you know, like his prior fights at WEC to, you know, the UFC winning the championship belt and everything like that. Like, he submitted Anthony Pettis. And then the TKO over Gaethje. I mean, he seriously put on a show there. And it's amazing that the level of striking between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, it's not really that far away. But when you look at it and on paper, it doesn't seem like it's that far away. But in actual reality, it was definitely something that made people open their eyes and say, hey, maybe Dustin Poirier is actually a better striker than Justin Gaethje by far. And I think that's something that people, you know, I think that's something that a lot of people think about, and a lot of people are going to probably like attribute towards Dustin Poirier because he has amazing boxing. He has, you know, amazing striking from like almost anywhere. I mean, like I said, look, he TKO'd Alvarez. He TKO'd Gaethje. Holloway. Look at the Holloway fight. A lot of people could say that, hey, you know, Holloway was definitely in that fight. But the difference in a masterclass striking between Holloway, who is an amazing elite striker if you've watched his fights, and Dustin Poirier, you could say it's the weight gain, you know, the weight difference, or you could say it's a division difference. You can say whatever it is. But Holloway is definitely not he's not anywhere below an elite level striker. And Dustin Poirier he basically had his level above Max Holloway in both fights. So, I mean, it goes to say that, hey, in this fight between Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker and everything, Dustin Poirier has the boxing, he has the striking, and he has the credentials to prove that, hey, he might be the better striker in this fight. But then you look at Dan Hooker again, and you see that his 10 fights that he's won, only 2 of them got a decision. That would suggest that he has a lot of power to basically negate or basically deal with a lot of the strikes, blow for blow, coming from Dustin Poirier. So, I mean, that's something to look at there between those 2 fighters. And that's probably why it's the main event fight, because it's definitely going to be an exciting fight that people are going to look at, and people want to see a brawl. People want to see a fight. Exciting, through all of these fights and everything, possibly because of the last card, which was definitely a good card. Don't tar and feather me, okay? But it was definitely a good card. But people want to see a brawl. People want to see a fight. And Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker are definitely going to give people a fight. I don't think it's going to be a Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou type thing where they're kind of just trying to fill each other out for like the whole entire fight. So it's a pretty good card, and it's pretty cool that Dustin Poirier is going to back. Dan Hooker's getting his chance to, Dan Hooker's getting his chance to basically cement himself for the next title contention. It's definitely good stuff to watch, and we're definitely going to be watching, and we're going to see what it's going to look like out there for everybody trying to get into a spot for the lightweight division. Yeah, I agree with that fight book. I totally agree with that. If Justin does win, I mean, not only is the whole entire world going to go crazy, but it's going to throw the whole entire lightweight division into complete chaos, considering what people believe about Khabib and, him possibly being one of the greatest lightweights that have ever graced the octagon, being undefeated, everything like that. But yeah, if Justin does win and the UFC does give Tony Ferguson a title shot, which would be crazy considering how much of a difference it was in the last fight, unless Tony Ferguson can somehow prove to the UFC or prove to the fans that he somehow magically has progressed and updated himself in between that fight and the title shot. Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people will watch it. I think the UFC would definitely give it to him. I mean, without Conor McGregor and everything, I mean, the only fight that they really have to give him is whoever wins between, Poirier and Dan Hooker. I mean, and I can't see Tony Ferguson doing that much better against, say, someone like Poirier than he did against Gaethje. But the UFC definitely wants this fight to happen, or considering that Tony Ferguson and Khabib have just lost their last fight, this will make them fight and finally give, fight fans the fight that they've been trying to see for half a decade now. There's also an option, But you know what? It's the UFC. They're basically going to make fights with their top fighters that's going to make them a lot of money and make their fighters some good money. I'll go ahead and say that. I'm not going to get into the whole financial thing, but yeah, that's definitely a thing that could possibly happen. And whether Tony Ferguson is fighting, Justin Gaethje for a belt, or whether Tony Ferguson is fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov to get back into, the title fight or whichever, I think a lot of fans would basically pay pay-per-view money to see either one of those. That's just my honest opinion. But right now, I'm going to step on to Mickey Gall versus Mike Perry. Poirier did expose Khabib in the stand-up. You're right, Fightbook. He did expose Khabib in the stand-up, but to tell you the truth, I don't think a lot of people have ever really known Khabib for his amazing stand-up, which is crazy because Khabib also kind of went toe-to-toe with Conor McGregor and basically sat McGregor on his butt, which was probably one of the most surprising things in that fight, other than, the whole lead-up, the trash talk, the dolly through the window, Khabib doing the eagle over the cage. I mean, I think it's just one of those weird, strikers triangle, where it's just like one striker is better than other, then another striker, who's not as good a striker does better than another. So it's kind of like you have to think with the Khabib versus Conor McGregor fight. If Conor McGregor wasn't just out there just, plowing through Khabib Nurmagomedov in the striking, and Khabib was actually able to expose Khabib in the stand-up. But then Conor McGregor has already beating Dustin Poirier. It's kind of like I said, it's like a weird striker's triangle. Like, how do you gauge all of that? It's really hard to gauge all of that unless they do it twice. Like Khabib fights Conor McGregor, and then it's more of a stand-up fight, and Conor McGregor fights Dustin Poirier, and it's undo. But I wouldn't be surprised if I think things would turn out exactly the way that we think it would turn out if Khabib Nurmagomedov decided to pull a Daniel Cormier and just strike, not wrestle, not do anything, and just go out there and just swing his fist against. We saw what Daniel Cormier did versus Stipe Miocic, and we've already know Daniel Cormier's. We know his credentials. We know his history. We know, where Daniel Cormier came. Even though Daniel Cormier did win that striking title match, the second fight, he just went out there and swung, and look what happened. I can't say if Conor McGregor took the fight seriously against Khabib Nurmagomedov. I really can't. If he really didn't, I'm gonna have to say, for somebody who has been in the fight game for a long time, estimated somebody like he did, like you said, like he did versus Nate, Nate in the first fight, and to make that mistake again the second time is kind of a knock on him, to tell you the truth. It's definitely a knock on him if he were to go in this kind of and just not take it seriously and go in that cage. That's kind of on him. And I want to say that Conor McGregor, if he did not take that fight seriously, he deserved everything that happened to him in that cage. And it basically, like I've been saying and everything, in the striker's triangle between Dustin Poirier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Conor McGregor, he did that to himself, and that's just something that he's going to have to kind of live with. Khabib Nurmagomedov and everything. Why was he able to flatten Conor McGregor in that fight the way that he did? I think I'm going to have to somehow answer for, because I cannot. I only saw 3 of them somehow. If Conor McGregor were to come back and actually, as we said, and actually train and not listen to Dylan Dennis. Sorry, Dylan Dennis. If you're listening to this, don't come beat us up. Don't. This is no personal dig at you. This is nothing of the sort. But Dylan Dennis said Conor McGregor is ready. A lot of crazy stuff. And Conor McGregor probably believed. So, that's something that Conor McGregor is going to have to figure out, because we're just going to have to say that Conor McGregor is not stupid. And he actually took that fight seriously. And he paid for it, doing whatever it is that he did. So on top of that, maybe one day we'll get to figure that out when Conor McGregor either runs out of money, or he wants to fight again, or or he wants a nice boxing match and he needs Dana White to basically set it up for him. And he'll probably come back. And then we'll see. Maybe he'll get another shot at Khabib while he's a champion, or maybe he'll get another shot at Khabib while he's not a champion. But the option's already there, and even though Khabib's saying that he might actually retire in the next 2 or 3 fights. So, I don't know the next 2 or 3 fights, because that would suck, because we all love Khabib, and we all love seeing what he can do, but apparently